A high-stakes dance on the world stage is underway as President Biden meets with Saudi Arabia's controversial Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, a power broker in the Middle East, and also the man U.S. intelligence agencies determined approved the brutal murder of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi.
With respect to the murder of Khashoggi, I raised it at the top of the meeting. He basically said that he was not personally responsible for it. I indicated I thought he was.
But here at home, the president's domestic agenda and the hopes of climate change activists have again crashed into a Joe Manchin wall. This comes as inflation numbers out this week showed a historic spike, the highest since 1981. Joining me tonight to discuss this and more is my colleague, Nick Schifrin, PBS NewsHour's foreign affairs and defense correspondent. He's in Saudi Arabia. And joining me here at the table in studio, Hans Nickel, the political reporter for Axios, and Tarini Party, White House reporter for the Wall Street Journal. Thanks to both of you. Nick, let me start with you, who are with us at 3 a.m. local time. Let's get going with you. Staying awake for us, we appreciate it. Bring us the latest there from Saudi Arabia, and what is President Biden getting out of this trip?
Well, I think he's getting out a few things. He certainly wants to get out more Saudi and OPEC plus oil production to bring down gas prices. We could talk about that, whether that's even possible. I think he's getting, as U.S. officials would put it, avoiding a vacuum in the Middle East when it comes to the United States. The U.S. has receded, at least its influence has receded in this region over the last few years. Biden trying to stem that tide, questioning, I think a lot of people would question whether that's possible too. And in Israel, don't forget that it's important for Biden to be seen politically supporting Israeli officials, and frankly, he believes in it. He is and has been for a half century a big supporter for Israel, and of course, Israel getting what it wants also, that presidential visit. So I think it's all on those three levels, and overarching this is more regional cooperation, product of the Abraham Accords during the Trump administration, but also militaries and intelligence services across the region taking it upon themselves to cooperate because they see a common enemy in Iran.
Tarini, we just heard Nick talk about these three levels of goals from the Biden administration, but you know, a picture sometimes can dominate things. Let's talk about the fist bump here. We knew going into it, we were going to wonder what was going to be the interaction between President Biden and MBS, Mohammed bin Salman. They did have a fist bump, and that is getting attention from some Democrats here. This is someone who is known for human rights abuses. The United States has said that, and for involvement, according to the CIA and others, in the murder. Did the Saudis get what they wanted just from that photo? And did the U.S. concede something by doing it?
There's clearly a lot of discussion beforehand, whether it was going to be a handshake, whether it was going to be a fist bump. And of course, we got that answer today. And the photo, of course, the Saudis released it pretty quickly thereafter. And, you know, it does raise questions depending on what the president is able to accomplish from this meeting, whether it was worth it or not. And we're already hearing some Democrats, including Congressman Adam Schiff, raise that point. He tweeted today basically saying that the photo shows the grip that autocrats in the Middle East still hold on the U.S. and foreign policy because they're oil rich and can sort of have that grip on the U.S.
Hans Nichols, let's get into the why of this.
Yeah.
I know your reporting is that the president wasn't exactly skipping and leaping into this visit, but his administration said he had to go. Why?
Oil. Right? I mean, they've been talking about this really since February. They've been debating this. They've been mulling it. They've been trying to attach and find some moment for President Biden to go smooth things over with the Saudis and convince them to pump more oil, because it's just a basic fact of hydrocarbons. They have more of them underneath their ground, and they can pull them out really quickly if they just flick a switch. And so officials always knew the world needs oil. They know that they're facing a lot of energy shortages, natural gas. How cold the Europe winter is going to be is a big issue of concern inside the White House. And they were willing to risk at least have the prospect for more oil, and the risk being this photo. And you know, it's hard to kind of say what the long-term damage of this photo is, if it's just going to be glossed over, if it's going to stick with people. I generally have a theory that when you're covering some foreign trip, the side that releases something first is the side that's happier with it. right? And so sometimes you get these statements that come out and say the two leaders had a productive conversation, which is code for the two leaders were yelling at each other, right? So whoever releases the photo first or something first tends to want to get out front and wants that image. And I think that tells us here.
And here was the Saudis, releasing it first.
Now, I should have the caveats here, and here are my confidence bands. It was a Saudi photographer, right? And it was an official's photo, but like the White House wasn't dying to release, and we can check their feeds, and the White House puts out photos, to what extent this photo plays into the overall Biden mythology that they want to put out there. So yeah, point taken.
They were in a position. I'm going to follow up from what Hans is saying, Nick, and go to you. You raised this earlier, saying we could talk about oil and we can talk about gas prices. So Nick, talk about it. Will this trip have any effect on oil and gas prices in reality?
So a couple of points. One is that I asked Adel Al-Jubeir, the deputy foreign minister, basically in Saudi Arabia just a few minutes ago, about whether they would push OPEC Plus to release more oil, as the National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan suggested, or they would release more oil themselves, as the president suggested tonight. And he did not say yes. He didn't say no, but he did not say yes. And he actually said that they've been producing more oil in the last 9 months, that they've taken steps to think about high gas prices, and that they were not committing to take further steps to try and release enough oil to make a difference. So that's point number one. Point number two is that whether the UAE and Saudi Arabia can release more oil. We know Mohammed bin MBZ, the head of UAE, told President Macron just a few weeks ago when all the leaders were at the G7 that he did not think that there was enough oil that the UAE and Saudi could pump in the next 6 months to actually affect gas prices in the United States. I mean, that is from the horse's mouth in Abu Dhabi. And so we know that regional officials do not think that their pumping more will actually lead to the kind of political benefit that you guys are talking about in the studio. So between those two things, you know, possibly, it seems like the National Security Advisor and the president wouldn't be so confident about more oil coming if they didn't get some private reassurances. But whether we'll actually see a difference is another question.
Now, Nick began that segment talking about an official neither saying yes nor no exactly. Hans, I want to ask you about an American official not exactly saying yes or no verbally. That's Joe Manchin.
Right.
Behind the scenes, he is saying that right now he is a no on the climate change portion of the Biden agenda. And I think a lot of Democrats think that means he's a no forever.
Yeah.
But can you take us into exactly what's happening there and how big of a deal is this?
So he's a no this month, is what Manchin would tell you. And so this last 24 hours, the big discussion about this, because Manchin went to Schumer and Manchin said, I'm just not going to be there this month on a broader package for climate and energy. And we can just do the numbers real quick. He'd always been talking about $300 billion. That was generally a ballpark. This morning, Manchin clarifies his comments, calls into a West Virginia radio show that we all listened to for the first time. Hoppy Kirschval, great show.
It was a good show.
It was a great show. It's dynamic. It's fun. He calls in and says, actually, I'm for Medicare doing renegotiating drugs through Medicare. I'm for something for the healthcare exchanges. And I'm for taking a lot of money, $240 billion if you back it out, towards deficit reduction. But nothing on climate and energy this month. He wants to wait for the inflation numbers, and which we all know are going to come. The July numbers will come later on in August when the CPI number hits. And that's always been the barometer for Joe Manchin, is inflation, inflation, inflation. He's been talking about this for months. He's felt that his theory of the case has been validated every time the numbers go higher, and he's not in a position to really move when inflation is this high.
So they're not moving any more warmly toward anything. And Trini, I want to ask you, Joe Manchin's effectively had a veto pen on this president. This might sound like a kind of a joke, but I mean it quite sincerely. Like, is Joe Manchin defining the Biden presidency? How much is he defining the Biden presidency?
He certainly is. I mean, he's basically, Prime Minister Joe Manchin at this point. And, the president knows that and has tried to work with him, tried to negotiate directly with Joe Manchin, and it hasn't really worked out. The president was asked today if he thinks that Joe Manchin is negotiating in good faith. And the president basically said, I don't know. I haven't done the negotiating on this myself. So he didn't really answer yes or no on that front. But Joe Manchin has Every senator in the Senate, of course, has so much power, and Joe Manchin is certainly wielding that power over and over again. And this was just the latest. And the fact that the White House pitched this massive proposal, and just mainly because of Joe Manchin, a little bit also because of Kyrsten Sinema, this package has slimmed down over the months, and right now it's basically to the bare minimum. And the president said today that the Senate should go ahead and move forward on it because this seems to be all that they're going to get.
Without the climate provisions in it, right?
Exactly.
So, Nick, I want to bring all this back to you and Jeddah and our president. And I'm curious, you've spent a lot of time in the region. You've been traveling around the region right now. How is President Biden seen there?
I think it's not just President Biden. I think we have to call a spade, and then a lot of governments in the Middle East see the United States as a receding power. I think that the Trump administration's efforts were to try and stem that tide and were to try and accelerate what was already happening, which is cooperation between Israel and the Sunni governments as a response to the Iranian threat and as a response to what they saw as the Obama administration's apathy to the region. And as some of the regional actors told me during the Trump administration, as a response to not being sure what Trump was actually up to. And so we saw the Abraham Accords. We saw all this momentum between Sunni Arab governments and Israel that saw Iran as a mutual threat. And the Biden administration's jumping on that momentum. They are simply trying to accelerate things, and Saudi is the crown jewel of that effort of normalization. Israeli officials, Saudi officials, all Arab officials say that if Saudi took any kinds of steps toward normalization, it really would be a game changer militarily, intelligence, and certainly politically. That's just not going to happen, frankly, according to officials across the region, until King Salman dies. And it's not going to happen until Saudi Arabia and the U.S. Really do have a better relationship. But that's clearly where the momentum is going. And so the U.S. is part of that right now. But frankly, that momentum was started irrespective of U.S. policy.
It's fascinating, these tectonic plates around the world of power, sometimes defined by one man, sometimes not by one man. Sometimes one man has to kind of go along with them. Nick Schifrin, I want to thank you for joining us, for sharing your reporting, staying up past your normal waking hours for us. We appreciate it.
Thanks very much.